Did anyone else spend their childhood watching things they probably shouldn't have been watching on the internet? What do you mean it was just me? I know you're not so innocent. If you're as old as I am and you so much as stepped your dirty, unsuspecting foot onto the World Wide Web as a kid, then I guarantee you your childhood was filled with poorly aged Newgrounds animations and raunchy college humor videos or something similar. If you were really unlucky, you probably even started learning that the internet had rules, at least 34 of them. I know I did. But if you were unlike myself, you may have stumbled upon a particular subgenre of video that became a pivotal building block of my childhood, as well as many others. Yes, these are, I don't know what to call them exactly. They're Sprite videos about Sonic, Shadow, and Silver that use Speakonia. The Sonic, Shadow, Silver, Speakonia Sprite show. Nice ring to that. In the mid to late 2000s, and even early 2010s, it seemed like every day a new channel would pop up to pump these out. Every creator had their own flair, but there was a familiar formula and character dynamics at the heart of all of these. These three lived in a mansion together and got into wacky, distinctly 2000s adventures, often with whichever fan character that particular uploader had invented that week. But, much like any genre of internet content, these didn't spontaneously create themselves overnight, as cool as that would have been. If you remember these videos, then there's a good chance you remember the man that started it all, one Kudu17. Not only were his animations some of the most popular, iconic, and beloved, but they were the first, and a lot of the core tenets of the Sonic spriting scene originated with him. So today, I'm going to take you through Kudu's body of work and try to paint a picture of how it progressed over time, as well as what it was like growing up with these videos. Fair warning before we begin, these are edgy 2000s internet videos made by a teenage boy and later a young man. I'm in an interesting position with these because, like I said, I grew up with these videos. I enjoyed revisiting them, but I also think it would be wrong to talk about them without acknowledging some of the more iffy subject matter that occasionally crops up. I don't intend to condemn or disparage Kudu himself in any way. I actually spoke to him in the process of making this video, and he seems like a good guy. He readily admitted that some things had probably aged poorly when I asked, and even privated a particularly egregious video upon rewatching it. A lot of these things are products of the era, as bad as they may be, and I'm not about to throw someone who was a teenager at the time under the bus for the sake of critiquing the content. I will say that if you have any issue with the way I present this stuff, whether you think I'm not handling some of the worst material with enough respect, or if you think I'm harping on it too much, I would love to hear some constructive criticism in the comments. This is the reality of a lot of older internet content from this era, and any feedback will impact how or if I cover other content of this nature in the future. It's important to me to document the history of these videos with the respect they deserve, but it's also important that I do right by my audience. Either way, please don't harass Kudu about it. He made these videos over 10 years ago, and I'm the one digging them up and choosing to present them in the way that I am. All that to say, here's a big old blanket content warning. If you're not in the mood for hearing about any of this stuff right now, then you might want to watch another video. Think of this as the Disney Plus disclaimer you get before Aladdin or The Muppet Show. These are art on the same level. With that said, let's start things off. Our story begins on August 26th, 2006, with the upload of a now classic video entitled Sonic Ends Rayman. We're not going to talk about that one. He followed up 2 months later with a more elaborate animation called Shadow vs. Chaos. Pretty good looking stuff for the time, but it was only 16 seconds, until a week and a half later when he expanded it to a whopping 3 minutes and 12 seconds. While this is still a far cry from the type of work Kudu would eventually become known for, I think this particular video is the first one worth really diving into. During this time, Kudu was a Newgrounds frequenting 15-year-old Sonic fan. As a former Newgrounds frequenting Mario fan with a Mario blooper shaped hole burned into the left side of my brain, I want to be clear that people were making interesting things with these types of characters during this period. Oftentimes, things the companies who owned them would never do. One of Kudu's biggest early influences that I think comes through very clearly in the Shadow vs. Chaos video are the numerous fight animations that pit Sonic characters against one another, or sometimes even cross them over with other franchises. It wouldn't be long before Kudu's influences led him in a different direction, however. You see, he'd been interested in text-to-speech from a young age. When I sat down with him, he recounted a story about how a Christmas gift his sister got one year sparked something within him.
Back in 97 or 98, for Christmas, my family got a new computer, and both my sister and I got a CD-ROM so we had something to do on it. She got this American Girl game where you made plays, and you had these characters and you set them up on this little fake stage, and you typed in what you wanted them to say, and they would say it in a text-to-speech voice.
Sometimes I have a sudden urge to fart on this chair.
and I found that so hilarious that I probably end up playing her game more than mine and just making like just stupid little videos you'd expect an 8-year-old boy to make, just like, I've got a barf.
Years later, he would discover some animations by a collective known as the Clock Crew, and holy shit, if I attempted to holistically explain the Clock Crew, we would be here for another full hour, so I'll just give a synopsis. Way back in 2001, there was a Newgrounds user named Strawberry Clock who kept uploading low-quality Flash animations to the site. Newgrounds was set up so that user-submitted content needed to be rated positively in order to stay on the site and enter the portal, which is where you'd find the majority of content. Every single thing he made ended up being rated so poorly that it dropped off the site, until one day, by the sheer will of God, one of his videos, simply titled B, managed to make it to the portal. This video is now legendary. This video is now legendary! And this eventually, somehow, led to a whole group of other people with names like Orange Clock and Raspberry Clock joining him in his exploits. A lot of these animations have the sort of surrealist and often, we'll say, edgy dark comedy you'd expect of Newgrounds content from this period. We'll come back to the topic of edgy humor later, so we can break it down a bit more. Anyways, earlier Clock Crew animations tend to use poorly recorded voice samples of the creators or stolen audio clips from other media, but at some point, the Clocks developed their own signature voices.
Billie Jean's not my girl. She's just a girl. That's it, I'm the one.
Clearly, it was around this time that the crew discovered Speakonia. Speakonia's history proved to be quite difficult to trudge up information on, but what you need to know is that it's a program that allows you to turn text into speech.
My rafflecopter goes swah 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 swah.
The voices commonly associated with Speakonia, such as those used by the Clock Crew, have a very robotic sort of sound to them, which Kudu found funny. Because of these factors, he adopted the program, and the first video of his to utilize it was about Mario? Yeah, in late October, Kudu uploaded a one-off video called Mario Gets Unmotivated, marking his first use of Speakonia. Basically, he just came up with the idea of Mario giving up on rescuing Peach and thought it was funny. The video is very rudimentary and rough around the edges, displaying the famous 2-pixel resolution that was popular around this time, and playing out exactly how you'd imagine a teenager in 2006 would want it to. But it's really interesting to look back on because you can see the seeds that would later become hallmarks of Kudu's content, right down to some of the voices. At the time, viewers may have recognized a few of these from the Clock Crew, but if you ended up becoming a fan of the Sonic videos he'd eventually make, chances are these will sound familiar for different reasons. Sonic himself even appears, albeit with a different voice. This leads us in what I would like to dub the early Speakonia era, in which the Sonic sprite format began to take shape through shorter form videos. The first video to pioneer it was, of course, Silver tells a racist joke. The whole premise of this one is that, well, Silver starts telling a racist joke to Sonic, but stops when Shadow enters, as Shadow is black. Sonic rats him out, and Silver utters what would become his catchphrase for the first time.
Ow, 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 ow. How did I not see that coming?
Much like the Mario video, we're not operating off the in-game personalities here, and that will continue to be a trend. The character dynamic, particularly between Shadow and Silver, starts to take shape here, sort of resembling what it would ultimately become. Silver's being sort of an idiot, doing something he shouldn't be doing, and Shadow, of course, punishes him with violence. Very classic stuff. Sonic is there. We'll talk more about that later. Around this time, Kudu also uploaded 2 videos memeing on a photo of his friend Tom, who admittedly is striking a rather funny pose. Reminds me of my old band photos. The awkwardness is very tangible. I bring these videos up because what you have to understand about this photo of Big Tom is that it would cameo in nearly every sprite video on the channel from this point forward. So the coming of Tom ushers us ever closer to what I like to call the golden age. Things would continue to fall into place with Shadow gets a Helio. Don't worry, I didn't know what a Helio was until writing this script either, and I'm proud to say that after doing some research in the form of watching old commercials, I still don't know. I'm gathering that you're not supposed to call it a phone. It looks like a phone, it makes calls like a phone.
That sure is a fancy phone.
Called it a phone? I told you he wouldn't understand. What? It's got MySpace Mobile.
Bottom line is, Shadow paid a lot for his Helio, and he is none too happy about Silver calling it a phone. The racist joke in the last video clearly made Shadow angry, but he gets more hostile towards Silver in the future videos, so I have to wonder, was Silver ignorantly referring to the Helio as a phone the inciting incident that drove Shadow to true hatred? Am I reading too deeply into a 2-minute video from 2007 based on a commercial for a product no one remembers? I don't know why you would suggest something like that when my analysis has never been off base before, but I'll entertain your deluded notion and move on. Much like every creator does at some point in their career, Kudu17 tried to catch lightning in a bottle twice and recapture an old success with Silver Tells another racist joke. I suppose the interesting thing in this case is that he only waited 4 months to do it, but it worked, I guess. This video has twice as many views as the original. There's a lot of magic to this one, apparently. Considering it uses the entirety of a song from Avenue Q, and it hasn't been taken down for copyright infringement in the 14 years it's existed on this platform, you have to remember that the late 2000s was a dark time for that sort of thing. I still have my scars from the WMG wars of the late aughts, as I'm sure many of you do as well. The song in question is, of course, Everyone's a Little Bit Racist. Oh no. Oh no. Oh no. I don't think I can holistically unpack this song and its implications, you know, like, I kind of doubt a teenage boy making Sonic Sprite videos in 2007 really thought about this with a high level of scrutiny. We could probably move on. Things really started to take form with April's Shadow Turns Emo. This introduced more staples like the Family Guy inspired cutaway gags and the strange, inexplicable targeting of Rosie O'Donnell. That Family Guy influence starts to play a very big part in the humor moving forward, for better or for worse. The Rosie O'Donnell thing's weird. Much like Tom, she ends up cropping up as a recurring joke in multiple videos, with the punchline usually being, she's fat or she's annoying. In this video, for example, Silver is trying to cheer Shadow up by showing him people who have it worse and yet can still smile. The last one is Rosie O'Donnell, whose big problem is, of course, the fact that she is Rosie O'Donnell. I asked Kudu about this because I found it really strange, and he said it was because he just never liked her on The View. He found her annoying. It's sort of funny seeing it crop up repeatedly just because it's such a random, unexpected thing, but this is kind of the start of an unfortunate recurring trend in Kudu's videos. Jokes that feel edgy or mean for no real reason. Now, the term edgy humor is somewhat infamous for its use as a cover for bigoted humor. It's the old meme. Yeah, I like dark humor, says something racist. This is something that 100% absolutely does happen. How many times have you heard, it's just a joke, after someone said some awful thing about a group of people? Edgy humor isn't necessarily entirely this. I don't want to act like I've never enjoyed a tasteless joke. I think shock value can be hilarious, but this is enough of a problem that I think it warrants discussion. This sort of relates to the idea of punching down. Of course, on a holistic level, Rosie O'Donnell easily has more power than some kid on the internet making Sonic videos, but making it about something like her weight sort of ruins that a little bit, doesn't it? Like, yeah, that'll show her and every other fat person watching these videos. This can apply to other groups and people too. Like, take any given politician you don't like. There is limitless potential to make fun of them. A lot of politicians actively make the world a worse place for a lot of people who have less power than they do. It's satisfying to knock them down a peg. But if you make fun of, like, a politician you don't like and the punchline is, ha, it's because they're a woman, or they're black, or they're gay, then suddenly it's not really as funny. Of course, making fun of someone because they're fat isn't really quite the same thing as those, but you get the point I'm making, right? There's nuance to this, of course. It's not impossible to ever make a funny joke about a marginalized group of people, and it's also possible to use irony to make jokes or salient points about things that are usually harmful ideas or stereotypes. And girls don't play video games. I don't know. Again, I'm not trying to be the you can never make jokes about this or that police, but I want to explain why some parts of these videos, and frankly, most YouTube and Newgrounds videos from this era that I watched when I was younger, haven't aged the best. Edgy humor is all about shock value, and if you're just indiscriminately making jokes for shock value, you're probably gonna end up with a few that don't look so good in retrospect. We'll probably be coming back to this later. I really don't want to rag on Kudu this much all at once because I don't necessarily think he'd stand by all of this today, but while we're talking about targeted humor, this video definitely uses emo as a punchline with everything you'd imagine that would entail. Definitely not a big fan of the self-harm joke. And Silver's advice to help Shadow being, oh, well, other people have it worse than you, and that just immediately fixing his depression is not great either. I live with depression, and I could probably build a little town with all the people I've been close to who also do, and yeah, I think I'm comfortable with saying that this isn't how it works. This is definitely one that the lovely Windows Movie Maker wipe transition can't save, unfortunately. You can't let the women's ruin your life is a pretty good line though, I'll give it that. Okay, I'll get off my soapbox now. It's so weird doing this, that like, here I am, the arbiter of morality, here to tell you why the YouTube video from 2007 doesn't get every detail correct. Like, it's so overly serious. Let's get back to talking about Sonic. But hey, it's not all bad. This one is yet another important step in the growth of the format. It's a bit longer at around 5 minutes, and the character dynamics between Shadow and Silver are solidifying themselves more and more. Shadow's still not quite as mean as he'd eventually become. He still doesn't hurt Silver until he pushes his luck and starts insulting him, which marks 3 videos in a row that end with the iconic ow wow wow wow. How did I not see that coming? With that, the primordial days of this format are over, and we are finally ready to thrust ourselves face first into the golden age. I took a shower between takes because I was dirty. Now, the thing you gotta understand about Shadow Buys a Haunted Mansion is that it is easily one of the most iconic Sonic Sprite videos of all time, at least for this very niche subgenre. I feel like I've seen numerous videos from up-and-coming YouTubers essentially trying to make their own version of this. In another life, I thought I could hack it in this godforsaken industry, and I'll bet you'll never guess what the premise for my first video was. There's even a specific reference to this video in there.
I can't get on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire again.
Even young Baby John felt the need to pay their respects. This video is 2 parts and 14 minutes total. In a way, I consider it the true first episode. The plot is essentially that Shadow, in spite of calling Silver instead of Sonic during his lifeline, has won Who Wants to Be a Millionaire.
You just won $1 million!
And uses the money to buy a mansion for the 3 hedgehogs to move into. However, this mansion is haunted by the Tails doll? Yeah, like, you know, the one from Sonic R. I don't know if you happen to remember, but this dude was super popular in creepypasta circles for a while. Like, ooh, the spooky Tails doll's gonna kill you. He's gonna come through the screen. No! Ooh, he's gonna come through the screen and kill your dad. So, coupled with the mansion concept, Kudu used this to make the Scooby-Doo parody he'd always wanted. This is where we start getting into another common pattern with these videos. Kudu liked to structure them after various movies or TV shows. In this case, while there are some very specific references to Scooby-Doo tropes and the structure is similar, it deviates enough to stand strong on its own, I think. The second half does get a little bogged down with references to other random things like the old "That's incredibly rude" Tom Cruise clip, The Princess Bride, and Star Wars Episode 3. According to an audio commentary on this particular episode, uploaded to the channel about 2 years later, Episode 3 is his favorite Star Wars movie.
Oh, Star Wars scene. I don't care what you guys say, Episode 3 is my favorite, followed by 6.
According to Kudu himself, when I sat down to talk to him, it is not. I personally think the whole mansion concept, setup and all, is pretty brilliant. Having the 3 hedgehogs live together simplifies things, giving them an excuse to work off each other, and making their home extravagant means it's an interesting locale on its own. There's a reason everyone in the Sonic Sprite game copied off of Kudu's homework in this regard. Part of the reason this video has achieved the sort of icon status it has is down to the humor, which is some of the best he would ever put to Windows Movie Maker. From the old outdated memes like the Find the Computer Room setup and the twist of Jack Thompson being Satan, to Shadow's disproportionately mellow "that's pretty darn nifty" upon winning $1 million, this video is still one of the most memorable for me personally. If you're willing to put up with the heavy reference humor in the second half and the unfortunate but rather minor gay joke at the end, I think this is a pretty good jumping in point if you want to get an idea of what these videos were all about. Something that kind of caught my interest was another Family Guy-esque cutaway where Silver recalls having Willy Wonka as a lawyer. It's strongly implied here that Silver has killed a man, and that got me thinking, how important was the continuity of these videos? Is it just sort of fast and loose so Kudu can tell jokes like this? Or are we supposed to take at face value that Silver is a murderer? Believe it or not, he actually leaned towards the latter.
So I really did try to keep characters who were dead. So in that courtroom scene, I think they're saying Big the Cat is dead, and that's why I never used Big the Cat after that.
This will come up again later. Shadow Buys a Haunted Mansion laid the foundation, and the follow-up, Silver Falls in Love, does a good job of playing within that framework. The plot to this one is also simplistic in a way that works quite well. Silver spends a bunch of Shadow's money and ends up feeling bad about it, so he gets a job at Burger King. He becomes a working man. He ends up hitting it off with Blaze, one of the customers there whom he has never met before, and they start dating. But then, there's someone else! Pac-Man, you bastard! So it doesn't exactly work out. Immediately, I noticed that the humor is a bit sharper. I mean, the idea of Silver falling in love while working at Burger King is pretty funny from the get-go. There's more good laughs that come from the situation itself rather than, hey, look at this thing I like. I think my favorite bit is when Sonic inexplicably vomits up some blue goo and Silver looks down at it while he keeps talking, especially because neither of them verbally acknowledge it. It just kind of happens. This isn't to say the reference humor is gone, far from it. There's a lot of YTM&D jokes, and Tom is also here, but the actual writing is a bit more polished in addition to that. Another thing I like is that we're already playing around with continuity. Shadow Buys a Haunted Mansion is directly referenced, which makes sense because they didn't, like, move between videos. And the resolution to the story ends up being a mirrored scene from Shadow Turns Emo, where Shadow now has to cheer Silver up. A lot of the dialogue is taken from that video verbatim, which is then lampshaded.
This seems really familiar.
Yeah, you're right.
Shadow's speech works wonders because Silver just immediately decides to stop being depressed.
I'm gonna stop being depressed now. It's pretty boring.
You know, as you do. Unlike Shadow turns emo, the extreme and sudden shift of his attitude is acknowledged and played for laughs here, which I think is a lot funnier. The continuity serves as a bit of a double-edged sword for Kudu here, though. Knuckles dies at the end of this video, and because Kudu tried to keep most continuity consistent, he ended up unable to use Knuckles for the duration of the run. Blaze isn't exactly happy watching Silver decapitate Knuckles in broad daylight either, so I think it's safe to say that she also didn't become a regular. So, if we can't use Knuckles or Blaze anymore, who else is left? Oh my god. If we're having a conversation about the most iconic and important videos in the Sonic Sprite canon, then Team Chaotix Moves In is another Hall of Famer. The plot is what you'd expect. After their house burns down, the Chaotix end up moving in with our main trio. Unfortunately, all three of them are exceptionally annoying, and each have a very exaggerated defining trait.
Hello. Hey, Shadow, let's go for a little ride. Why now?
So the gang decides to get rid of them by hiring a hitman. Unfortunately, the Chaotix are all so stupid that they end up killing each other before the hitman could get there, which means that the Hedgehogs sort of just wasted their money. I kind of question why their guns can kill, but Shadow's never seems to. Notably, despite dying in this video, the Chaotix continue to come back time and time again, which I believe is the only big exception to the continuity rule. Kudu said that the inclusion of the Chaotix was informed not only by their popularity in the fanbase at the time, but also by the story he wanted to tell. Every chaotic has a toxic trait. Vectors is just being a walking meme, spouting off his lines from Shadow the Hedgehog. Espio likes to listen to Karma Chameleon by Boy George, which doesn't sound that bad at first, but like, it's literally the only thing he ever listens to. But the most iconic is Charmy, an arsonist who was apparently inspired somewhat by Kudu himself.
Now, as for Charmy, he does have a little bit of depth because he's actually based on myself when I was in 8th grade, because I kind of went through a pyro phase. I don't know, I steal my dad's lighters and have like a can of WD-40 and just like burn like these old toys. It was a stupid little teenage thing I went through. And so I put a little bit of that into Charmy, so this was like, yeah, a year or two after that.
The whole team, especially Charmy, would go on to appear in more videos, becoming fan-favorite characters. You better believe a lot of people ended up copying the shtick, too. It's here where we can see the humor continue to evolve in the Family Guy direction even more. This naturally means that we get the occasional miss. For example, I don't think Silver's favorite song being Weird Al is a particularly funny punchline, but when it hits, it really does work. The crunchy bitrate only makes the joke funnier. Some of these cutaways were jokes he came up with that didn't feel like they fit anywhere else, and while that does mean you get some non sequiturs, I think they work more often than not. It helps that he tried to avoid overdoing them, as I'm sure many of us can agree his inspiration often does. There's also the occasional joke where a character will speak in a stock voice clip, which also happens in Haunted Mansion. It grew on me after a while.
There's definitely a charm to it, albeit a messy charm.
The Shadow-Silver dynamic also feels like it's finally fully formed. Silver is annoying and won't stop pushing, Shadow retaliates with violence. It works. This episode really does feel like the one where the writing hit its stride. It's definitely one of the classics. It was also by this point in watching that the sort of awkwardly timed cadences of the text-to-speech voices had become like a second language to me again, lulling me into a comfortable and familiar rhythm. To top it off, we get some truly premium credits. That's that good movie maker crust. War of the Fan Hogs is another one that continues to stick out in my mind. Silver wins a Wii Online, while Shadow sees the infamous PS3 baby commercial and decides to go on a Target run. He snaps Amy's neck, wiping out another potential recurring character, and ends up buying a PS3 from Big Tom. He also buys a baby doll named Betsy, who, believe it or not, also becomes a recurring character. That commercial's persuasive power truly knows no bounds. Shadow figures that Sonic should get an Xbox 360 to complete the set. Sonic is initially reluctant, but apparently he lost a bet a few years prior because he thought that O.J. Simpson would be found guilty. The shock value on that one completely worked for me. That's a good cutaway. So, a few Movie Maker transitions later, and all the Hedgehogs have their consoles. Bada bing, bada boom. Shadow and Silver get really competitive about whose system is the best. Sonic gets the Red Ring of Death because his video was uploaded in 2007. And then the consoles turn into giant goddamn robots bent on destroying the Earth, until Betsy takes them out in a fight scene soundtracked by Prodigy's Smack My Bitch Up before they can do any damage. Do you got all that? Keep up. I could talk about how this one is also quite funny, but I think now would be a good time to sort of take a step back and talk about some of the big overarching aspects of the series. First, I want to shine a light on the music selection. This video alone, in addition to Smack My Bitch Up, features Baby Come Back, You Might Think, and Time of the Season. There's a great mix of stuff in these, especially softer 70s and 80s rock that helps set a pretty distinct mood. I was actually introduced to a lot of these songs through these videos. Most of the music chosen was stuff that Kudu already listened to that ended up fitting the mood of particular scenes. The pattern continues throughout the rest of the run, and I wouldn't have it any other way. I have these videos to thank for sparking my deep and only partially ironic love of yacht rock, and I could not be more thankful. The other thing I want to discuss is a running gag that gets its start here. Sonic is,
Where are you gonna be? At the cosmetics. Where? I mean the sporting goods.
Now we're going back to the mall to get makeovers.
I'm gay.
Yeah, so every character kind of has their thing. Silver's sort of the dumb comic relief, Shadow's the tough guy with the gun. Sonic's thing is that he might be gay, and the way this joke manifests is usually that Sonic will mention an interest in some stereotypically feminine hobby, like getting makeovers or watching Sex and the City. I don't think it's like a malicious bit. The punchline is never gay people are bad, but it's pretty dated. Kind of reminds me of the whole Seinfeld, not that there's anything wrong with that bit. It's a very like 90s 2000s sitcom type beat. Potentially problematic implications aside, I just think it's not a very strong bit. I do kind of like Sonic excessively calling everything gay in college before just directly stating, I'm gay. But I think it gets to be a bit played out, and it's something to keep in mind if you watch these with modern eyes. I also can't help but feel kind of bad for him sometimes. He backs off saying he's going to the cosmetics when Shadow questions him, for example. Is Sonic supposed to be relatable here? Because he totally is. The societal expectations of what a man, hedgehog should be have Sonic down. Maybe these videos are actually secretly good at gender non-conforming representation and it's played as a joke. Probably not. Anyway, next up is Sonic Adopts a Chow, the Blue Blur's first starring role, and unfortunately this one's not quite as tight as the last few. When I asked his least favorite video, Kudu actually said this one, pointing to a few facets of the story, like how it literally just begins with Sonic saying he's going to the pet store for shits and giggles and adopting a chow. Even as a rare Sonic-centric video, the dude's barely in it. He leaves the other two to watch the chow, they lose it, they find it again, Sonic decides he doesn't want the chow anymore, roll credits. It's not terrible though, I do like the bit where Silver decides to rhyme for no reason.
No way! No how! Here comes Sonic with a chow.
What?
And the sitcom laughter when he lies and says the chow doesn't give them any problems is excellent, especially with how authentically lo-fi that applause is. But it's definitely not on the same caliber as something like War of the Fanhogs or Silver Falls in Love. I do think this one sort of highlights that, despite the gay jokes becoming more frequent, Sonic is very much the straight man of the trio, and that helps a lot of the comedy work. You have the brooding Edgemaster and the childish moron looking for the chow so their chilled out friend doesn't get mad at them. And in spite of it being a weaker video, that dynamic still makes it work. Shadow loses his Chaos Emerald is another personal favorite of mine. It opens with Silver finding a Chaos Emerald in Shadow's room, which he uses to go to Las Vegas and gamble all of their money away.
Holy crap!
He loses the last of it playing poker badly against Big Tom, which he wouldn't have done if he took my friend the Manic Pineapple's advice!
I thought you were bluffing.
No, Silver! If someone goes all in, they clearly have a good hand! Don't go all in with a pair of threes! Why didn't you watch the video, Silver? What are you doing? Now, because Silver was incapable of watching a YouTube video that came out 12 years after this one was uploaded, we are introduced to Ray and Sally. They drill into our trio's mansion to repossess all the assets. Not sure why it's their responsibility specifically, but we'll go with it. These two don't have a particular connection in Sonic canon that I'm aware of, but in Kudu's videos they're a duo whose primary goal in life is to judge everyone as much as possible.
I think at that point, I had killed off all the good characters and we're left with just the D tier. So that's kind of who was left.
Anyways, they see the emerald, decide it's the most important thing, and steal it. In the process, they send Sonic to another planet, which the description says is Cybertron from Transformers, rendering him a stop-motion husk of his former self. Shadow somehow deduces that the emerald has ended up in a museum, so the A-plot ends up being a heist involving him, Silver, and Betsy. The B-plot is that Sonic meets Triceradon, a Transformers character, and they try to send him back. The heist plot really carries it. It's definitely one of the ones I remember the most from back in the day. The humor is solid, and it introduced me to Copacabana by Barry Manilow. I mean, what more could you ask for?
Black Megatron is coming.
Black Megatron? Why do they call him Black Megatron? He looks red to me.
Where's my money?
Okay, I mean, I guess I could ask for that joke not to be included. That's not the best. One last point is this crowd scene actually features a bunch of fan characters. While Kudu doesn't remember who all of them are, he thinks he'd put out a YouTube bulletin asking for people to send theirs over, and said that some characters belonging to YouTube users Super Smash Bros. 7 and
Shannick77
are probably in the video. It is at this point that we reach the peak, the movie, if you will. And that movie is called Spider-Man 3.
I'm going to die.
Let me explain. Spider-Man 3 was released in spring of 2007. Kudu saw it and loved it. At the same time, he'd also been trying to think of a way to bring the Tails doll back. Bada bing, bada boom. Revenge of the Tails doll ended up being an ambitious project, so he initially ended up partnering with another YouTuber named
Shannick77
who you may remember from 3 seconds ago, to animate it. But oh no, Shannick bailed, so Kudu instead ended up working with Super Smash Bros. 7, now known as Game Bun. Smash Bros. 7's style of flash animation ended up giving this project a totally different feel from Kudu's other ones. It's very Newgrounds, almost like I'm watching an episode of Bowser's Kingdom or something. It feels more cinematic in every way, which is sort of weird to say, but the switch to flash animation after all the Movie Maker videos really does feel like the 2000s internet equivalent of a TV cartoon getting a silver screen adaptation. It's really cool. Every little touch, from something as big as the Mario Bros. C looking fight scenes to Silver's dialogue actually getting quieter as he runs further from the camera, is on point. The plot follows our trio going to a Star Trek convention. There's an arcade there featuring another flawlessly aged Rosie O'Donnell joke, and Shadow wins enough tickets to get the Scepter of Darkness from Sonic 06, which is, you know, just chilling at this fucking Chuck E. Cheese or whatever. Silver, with the ticket taker incapacitated, takes a jar of black silly putty. Meanwhile, the Tails doll has somehow risen from the grave. By the time he gets to the mansion, the putty has overtaken Silver, who is emo Peter Parkering up a storm. He is an edgy boy. He even does the jazz club scene. Mephiles is released from the scepter, but Shadow makes quick work of him in a banjo duel, so it's chill. What isn't chill is that Silver is continuing to be a real jerk, which culminates in a fight with Shadow. Silver runs off to a church to peel off the symbiote, the black silly putty. It then combines with Mephiles to make him a strong boy, and he partners with Tails doll to wipe out the hedgehogs once and for all. The stakes feel especially high in this one, with Betsy and Shadow both getting reasonably convincing fake-out deaths. I especially like Shadow's. He does this big anime finishing move called the Awesome Blast and dies in dramatic fashion, then proceeds to just show up at the house the next day like nothing happened. It's pretty good. An interesting note about this one while we're on the topic, on September 6th, 2008, the same day the first part of Revenge of the Tails doll was uploaded, a small up-and-coming YouTuber named 12's GameChamp21 uploaded a video of her own called SSS Show Episode 1, Sonic Shadow Silver Show. This would end up being the first video in her own long-running series of Sonic videos, which took, shall we say, some inspiration from Kudu 17.
Yeah, right.
I'm unclear on if she was the first person to start taking such a strong influence from his formula, but she certainly did become popular, and it's around this time that the whole thing goes from Kudu 17's style of making videos to a full-fledged genre that tons of people participated in, with all sorts of offshoots and different continuities. For the purposes of this video though, we're going to remain focused mostly on Kudu's work. A lot of these new Sonic spriters, or whatever you want to call them, is spriter a word? A lot of them would create their own fan characters to incorporate into their videos, often in a significant role. 12's GameChamp21 was actually a prominent example, taking a custom sprite sheet of the unused character Tiara Bubowski and repurposing her as Hannah, her own OC. This eventually evolved into a whole culture where people would create fan characters and they'd get incorporated into other people's videos. I remember watching some back in the day where it would be the whole mansion concept, but I swear to God, it was inhabited by Sonic, Shadow, Silver, Hannah, the uploader's own OC, and like 6 other fan characters created by different people. I bring this up because Kudu's next video, the 2-minute A Very Silver Halloween, contains a small dig at the expense of these fan characters.
You're a green Sonic?
No, I'm green.
Well, yeah, I can tell you're green.
No, that's my name. Green. Green the Hedgehog.
So you're a green Sonic?
No, I'm green. I'm my own character.
Oh, a green-colored me.
Damn it, no.
Silver also calls him a commie, which, as someone who has been disparagingly called a commie numerous times over the course of my YouTube career, I find hilarious. I brought this up, and Kudu talked about how he wasn't generally into fan characters.
think the main reason I wasn't keen on them, and I'm really glad I never really made any or incorporated any of them, is because this character is meaningless to everybody. Like, nobody knows who this is except for you. I don't know if you ever played Super Smash Flash on Newgrounds. Weren't there like 2 fan characters in there?
I know exactly what you're talking about.
And I remember thinking, who the hell are these guys? And then once I realized they were fan characters, I'm thinking, what a dumb choice. The whole series is kind of like a parody of you know, all the of just kind of video game lore and culture and stuff like that. So I just kind of wanted to use the assets that were available instead of creating these new characters nobody knew.
To him, fan characters lack that recognizability. Going in, you know who Sonic, Shadow, and Silver are, and you care about them. But Green, not so much. I agree with his assessment generally speaking, although I did enjoy a lot of videos with OCs back in the day, and still remember a few, like Hannah and Brian the Firehog, quite fondly. I feel like retrofitting existing Sonic lore and characters into this universe tends to have a higher success rate, though. I don't remember half the OCs I saw in other people's videos, but I tend to remember when, like, Amy or someone like that showed up. In my mind, this video, along with the final part of Revenge of the Tails doll, mark the end of the Golden Age. When I think of Kudu17's career and my memories of watching and re-watching his videos, I tend to think of stuff like Shadow Buys a Haunted Mansion and War of the Fanhogs first. But that's not to say there aren't good memories still to be made, because we're going into the third and final part of this video, where Kudu's most ambitious work resides. Starting in April 2009, this is the Experimental Era. I personally call this the Experimental Era because this is where Kudu's videos get truly ambitious. It starts with some short ones like Silver Goes to Tatooine, a 1-minute long student film done for Kudu's animation class, and Silver Gets Bored Again, a 2-minute short calling back to the earlier era. The second one isn't that experimental, but I bring it up because the gag with Shadow eating pizza out of a Chinese takeout box is still really funny to me for some reason. However, the first true cornerstone of this era was February 2010's The Wrath of Jason Griffith. If you weren't in the Sonic fandom in the late 2000s, this is going to require some context. So, when Sonic first transitioned to the third dimension, roughly, he was voiced by Ryan Drummond. The Sonic X anime ended up replacing that whole cast, and eventually that team took over dubbing the games. So starting in 2005, Drummond was replaced by Jason Griffith. To say that some folks on the internet were upset about this is an understatement. While the common consensus now seems to be that Griffith got better with time, his earlier performances as Sonic were often thought of as stiff and lower energy than Drummond's take. Kudu was among the people who weren't particularly satisfied with the shift in voice actor. In 2010, the year this came out, I guess Sega had been browsing Twitter because they replaced the cast again, resulting in Griffith being swapped for Roger Craig Smith, who voices the character to this day. Kudu, around this time, also found out that his friend Smoove did a pretty good Jason Griffith impression, so they decided to make a story out of it. The Wrath of Jason Griffith revolves around the man himself working at Chuck E. Cheese in a mascot costume after having been fired by Sega. The Hedgehogs go there for Shadow's birthday, don't ask, see Griffith, and make fun of his voice to the point that he cries. This enrages Griffith, so he creates a ray gun that replaces the voices of everyone in the world with his own. I loved this one when I was younger, but I'm a little mixed in retrospect. Maybe it's because I've always liked Griffith's portrayal of Sonic, but I feel like it's a little overly mean. I can't deny that the Griffith rap at the end is a banger, though.
Can I get a yeah? Can I get an alright? I'm Jason Griffith, I'm the guy you gotta live with, and I love to rock and party all night!
This one is a step forward on the whole. It might be a bit mean, but the concept is so over the top and ridiculous that it's still quite funny. And notably, this is the first video, aside from Revenge of the Tails doll, not to be edited in Movie Maker, but in Adobe Premiere, which Kudu had been learning in a multimedia class. The step up in fluidity is immediately noticeable, and the use of more elaborate movement adds even more character to these videos. Hey everyone, Editing John here with a last-minute little side note. Kudu's friend Smoove, who does the voice of Jason Griffith in this video, would go on to appear in most of Kudu's videos for the remainder of the run, and they're still friends to this day, to the point that Kudu stood in his wedding. These Sonic animations weren't just influential to the people who watched them, they were influential to the people that made them. A literal lifetime friendship formed because of this, and I think that's super cool. This uptick in animation quality continues in Silver and the Smash Bros. Tournament. Look at Tails play that trumpet! This one revolves around Silver training with his mentor Link to beat Mega Man in a Smash Bros. Tournament. The humor is, unfortunately, getting even edgier by this point. There's an implication that Link had to retire from the Smash scene because he... followed by a direct statement that, yeah, he did. There's not even really that much of a joke to it. The intended humor comes entirely from the shock value. It's pretty bad, honestly.
Hey, Mega Man.
What?
You're gay.
God damn it! Kudu's autobiographical streak continued in the minute-and-a-half-long epic Silver Plays Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3. Silver, hopelessly addicted to the aforementioned game, hogs the TV when Shadow wants to... Wait, they're in a mansion. How do they only have one TV? How have none of them ever considered that this was going to be a problem at some point? How much money do they have? In spring, Kudu uploaded 2 videos where he experimented with Gmod. The first one, Silver the Hedgehog, in my Gmod, is mostly just him screwing around. The second, however, Silver's Adventures in Gmod, may be his most ambitious Sprite video, to the degree that it can even be called a Sprite video. In reality, it's more of a Gmod musical, featuring characters from various franchises, including all of the My Little Pony characters, voiced by Kira Buckland. A voice actress from JoJo's features in the Kudu cinematic universe, and that's wild to think about. I've talked about Kudu's videos having a homemade feel, and this one is a perfect example. Even talking to him about it years later, you can hear his passion for this video in particular.
I definitely have a favorite video I ever made. Silver's Adventures in Gmod is my absolute favorite. And I think that one just came out at a really good time in my life. Like I was like 21, you know, just like early 20s, world is your oyster, prime college age. And these videos, watching them, like, are just little time capsules of my life. Just have little hints to stuff that was going on in my life. I think what made a lot of fun was that because it was Gmod, I told myself, I'm not going to do Speakonia characters. In the world of Gmod, nobody talks in Speakonia. And I actually got like voice actors to do a lot of the stuff. I was able to make it a musical. It was reflecting a bunch of, you know, just stuff going on in my life, and it was just a lot of fun to make because it wasn't a grueling process of, you know, making all these individual frames. And I think it came together just really well, and that one just holds a very special place in my heart.
You can feel through the layers of 2000s internet jokes and Kudu's computer struggling to keep up as the frame rate tanks that this video was incredibly fun to make, and it oozes charm in that regard. It's dated in an incredibly nostalgic and fun way. It makes me feel like it's 2012 even more than most of these do, and I genuinely really liked that about it. The old Gmod nostalgia helps add another layer too.
Alright, prepare yourself, monster, because I'm going to throw these animals at you all at once. Because I'm going to throw these animals at you one at a time.
By late 2012, Kudu was in college. He wasn't that much of a Sonic fan anymore, and he'd become interested in making other types of videos. This would culminate in September 2012's Hedgehog Race, a crossover featuring most characters who hadn't died yet, and Kudu's final Sprite video. The plot revolves around Jason Griffith holding a race where the grand prize is $5 million, which, of course, everyone participates in. This one really does come across like a culmination of everything Kudu had done up to this point, and something of a magnum opus. We even have 16:9 in a few shots. Hooray! So many of these jokes work for me. There's a bit where a Charmander tries to steal a car from our main trio, and Shadow actually helps him through it, leaving them hitchhiking. It's a great setup, and it feels like there's a lot of similar moments that take advantage of these characters and their quirks. One unfortunate F-slur aside, I'd actually probably call this one of the best aged videos Kudu ever made, and possibly my favorite. The ending actually does a fake out where it looks like Silver's died, and Shadow tells him how much he genuinely loves him. As someone who grew up watching these videos and the ones they inspired, especially after revisiting the rest of Kudu's catalog, this genuinely touched me a little bit. It might seem stupid, but these videos were a big part of my childhood, and I'm attached to these versions of the characters, in their own way. The sheer anticlimax of Silver living and Shadow having a muted reaction is also really funny, and sort of sweet in its own way.
You little rascal.
After Hedgehog Race, Kudu made a review of Food Fight before a lot of other people got to it, pivoting to a new type of content. It's not his best work by his his own admission. He went on to make a few list videos before settling into an irregular shitpost upload schedule. A lot's happened since his Sprite video heyday. So something happened while I was writing this video. Kudu told me in our conversation that he'd had a script he'd been wanting to make for years, a video called Shadow Makes a Meme. And after our conversation, believe it or not, on September 2nd, 2022, 10 years after the previous Sonic Sprite video, it actually came out. Now, I didn't script this part of the video because I thought it would work best to get my genuine reaction immediately after watching, and I have to say, it's really rewarding to, after starting this video and thinking, hey, does anyone remember these videos? These are so old at this point, there's probably never going to be another one again. Like, not even having that as a thought in the back of my brain, to see not only a new video from Kudu, but his best video, in fact. Now, I'm not going to go super in-depth on Shadow Makes a Meme because I can actually heavily recommend that if you've made it all the way through this video and you're curious about these old Sonic Sprite videos, you should just go watch it. But basically, the plot is like, 10 years have passed, the money's gone, Shadow gets a job making memes. There's still a single Rosie O'Donnell joke, but what are you gonna do? The humor is a lot better, both with references to the old videos and the classic style of humor. I actually laughed very loudly at this one.
I got it.
Let's hear it.
We should say a racial slur.
Spencer, we tried that already, remember? It backfired tremendously.
Yeah, I know, but I really don't think we used the right one. I truly believe in my heart that we should say, man, you just can't joke about anything anymore.
And the most surreal thing of all was watching this video, a new installment in a series I watched when I was probably like 12, constantly watching and rewatching at home, at friends' houses, everywhere, thinking about every single day, and seeing my name in the credits as a special thanks. I'd like to return that thank you to Kudu for being so lovely with this project, being patient through delays, allowing me to talk to him, and just giving me these videos to watch when I was younger. It's clear he's grown a lot in the last 10 years, and it was lovely to see him come back. I had a conclusion written that I was gonna use. Maybe I'll take a little bit of it, but really, I think that sums up what this video has become better than anything. While Kudu's old videos are not perfect, they have a lot of things emblematic of the time that date them, and they might be completely impenetrable to someone who wasn't there for the internet as it existed in the 2000s. I had a blast going back to rewatch them, as well as watching this brand new one. And this video, though critical, was ultimately a love letter to a series of videos that impacted my life way more than you would think a series of MS Paint doodles and Movie Maker edits could ever impact someone's life. They were something that inspired me to be creative with my own channel when I was like 9 or 10, probably. And though the content I make now is nothing like them, my passion for YouTube has continued to endure, and I'm forever grateful for the role that they fulfilled in helping me even learn how to use basic editing software. While it's important to acknowledge the faults and things from the past, it's also still okay to appreciate them and the impact that they made on you. And it's fun not only looking back at a time on the internet where not everything had to be the most polished professional presentation in the world. A 17-year-old kid could make videos in Microsoft Paint and Windows Movie Maker and make thousands of people laugh, but to also see that that same 17-year-old kid can grow up and not lose the sense of humor that made his content so compelling back then. It's honestly really cool. Anyways, I'm Jonii. Maybe someday, especially if you guys enjoyed this deep dive, I'll look back at some of the other creators in this niche and see if their content has also stayed special in spite of the rougher qualities. But for now, I'm gonna stay home, fighting off the desire to re-download Movie Maker and live vicariously through those Speakonia voices one last time. I'm Jonii, and this was Kudu17. Peace. Hey everyone, thanks for watching that incredibly long deep dive on the career of Kudu17. That was like 50 plus minutes probably. I'd like to give a couple shoutouts and acknowledgements. First, I know I've done this already a couple times, but of course shout out to Kudu17 for being really gracious with his time and the process for making this video. I'd also like to thank my friend Ninjastar Compass for editing about half of it. This whole project's made me pretty anxious and he helped to alleviate a lot of that, even though it was very difficult to get kind of a a fast, vibrant edit with a lot of the material we were working with, so huge shout out to him. You should check out the last video he did about Sega's franchise revivals in the last few years. He talks about Space Channel 5 and Monkey Ball. I'd also like to thank Let's MOSEY and TheNumenFromPacland for helping me look over the script to make sure I was handling the sensitive material in an appropriate manner. Newman just put out a video on Pac-Man World Repack and Pac-Man Museum Plus if you'd like to hear a little bit more Pac-Man talk. And hey, I don't know if you guys know this, but I started a Patreon recently. Every month I upload a commentary of one of my old videos, and occasionally I'll also share behind the scenes footage and audio, like blooper reels. The most recent things I've thrown on there as of yet are a commentary video on the American Kirby is Hardcore video, and a 13-minute blooper reel from the Panel de Pon video. I'm also very open to taking suggestions for more Patreon content if you guys are interested. If you donate $1 a month, you get access to everything, but if you donate $3, I'll say your name at the end of all my scripted videos. I'd like to give a huge shout out to my current $3 patrons: Archagent Everlasting, Bam Bam Dabuha, Cowboys in the Hood, Daroachie, Devnull, Don Rouse, etc., Gobblewonker, Inutsu, Mass Rivers, Mustache Duct Tape, and Pack Jeff. You guys, in addition to the $1 patrons listed on screen, helped making things like hiring Ninja to help edit this video possible. I'm looking forward to hopefully putting out a couple more videos this year than I did last year. I know this one was kind of out there, and there's gonna be some more out there ones this year, but I'll also be sure to give you the usual Jonii content that you've grown accustomed to. With that said, I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.